Uh, a warm welcome to all of you for this session on fluorescence imaging in head neck cancer surgeries. It's my privilege to introduce Dr. Sandeep Nayak, who's the Director of Surgical Oncology at Fortis Cancer Hospital, Bangalore. He's an eminent surgical oncologist, a truly skilled person. Uh, he's a robotic and laparoscopic surgeon with a special interest in fluorescence guided surgery. He has acquired the system a few years back, and he's gained quite a bit of experience in fluorescence guided surgeries. And he specializes in a surgery called as the rabbit technique, the robotic assisted breast insufflation thyroidectomy technique, and that is his pet. And I would before I ask him to start his presentation, I just want to introduce the topic a bit. So, in India, head neck cancer is quite common, and among head neck cancer, what we deal most commonly as surgical oncologists or even dedicated head neck cancer specialists tackle is the thyroid cancers and the oral cancers. So these are the commonest. So the two components of this presentation. So Dr. Nayak will be talking on the scope for fluorescence imaging in thyroidectomy surgeries, followed by my presentation on sentinel node biopsy in oral cancers. So we all, as postgraduates in surgery or ENT or with the ENT background, thyroidectomy is a favorite surgery for many of us, and this it must have been one of the first surgeries that we learn as a student, as a postgraduate student. And the humbug or the pitfall with thyroidectomy surgery, I mean, we have two major difficulties. One is the recurrent laryngeal nerve identification. Second is the parathyroid gland identification. Fortunately, the with the expertise, the recurrent laryngeal nerve identification and saving the recurrent laryngeal nerve is not much of a problem nowadays, and we are getting smaller and smaller thyroid lesions, and we are able to do a good job. But what is difficult, really difficult, is parathyroid gland identification, and even in experienced hands, the temporary hypocalcemia rate is nearly 20 to 30%, even in experienced centers, and the permanent hypocalcemia rate seems to be around 1 to 2%. Now, fluorescence, using fluorescence technology, identification of the parathyroid gland is an exciting technology, which if it can be, if the younger generation can adopt, they will be able to decrease the complications of inadvertent removal of parathyroid gland, and will be decreasing the hypocalcemia incidence in these thyroid surgeries. So let us learn from the master. Sandeep sir, please go ahead with your presentation.
Dr. Karthik, thank you very much. And to start with, I am not a master in this. I am still learning because there's lots to learn, and this is a very new technique and technology that has come up. And in fact, as we go, I think, in fact, from the last time I presented the same topic or similar topic to now, I've learned a lot. So things are evolving. So I'll be covering the thyroid aspect of the head and neck cancers today. And let me just, yeah. So the learning objectives of today's presentation is the challenges in head and neck cancer surgery. The thyroid and oropharyngeal cancers are the things which we'll be talking. So I'll complete thyroid, and then I'll hand over to Dr. Karthik for taking it forward. So the idea would be to understand how the technology has improved what we are doing today, and the future perspectives, how we would see it going forward. So about thyroid, as Dr. Karthik already mentioned, in fact, the scenarios in thyroid surgery which we should always remember is, one is hemithyroidectomy, where the only thing at risk practically is the recurrent laryngeal nerve, and in a total thyroidectomy, the scenario changes, and we have the recurrent laryngeal nerve on both sides, as well as parathyroid gland which is at risk. And central compartment dissection actually makes it much worse for the patient, because the recurrent laryngeal nerve as well as the parathyroid gland risk increases significantly because of extensive clearance that we do. Now, what is the accept or what is the common scenario when we look at the literature which is available, when we what are the complications, what are the problems that we see? One is, or the most important thing which we see, is a temporary hypocalcemia which can occur around in about 40% of the patients, especially when we are doing total thyroidectomy. We are not talking about near totals and subtotals and all that. We are talking about a proper total thyroidectomy. Permanent is seen in about 6.6% as per the world literature goes. Apart from that, if you see, everything else is very, very small percentage. So our aim of preventing complications and improving quality of life after thyroidectomy is all about saving parathyroid gland. Nothing else is really important. So how to identify parathyroid? Now, the standard or whatever we have been doing over the years is the visual identification by location is what we have been doing. But apart from that, there is, when we avulse the gland, we have the flotation technique, and we can also send it for frozen section. But is there any other way to prevent it from happening? That is something which we need to discuss today. So one technique is autofluorescence, or technology is autofluorescence. Second one is the use of chemicals to create fluorescence. So let us see let's understand the problem. See, superior and inferior parathyroids, though in textbooks we read it to be in a certain place, the problem with these two glands are that these four glands is that they have a varied situations or locations in the neck. In fact, they can be in such variations within the location that just by location it is impossible to say that this is the exact place where we'll find. I think all of us who do head and neck surgeries would have found it difficult and found parathyroid like looking tissue even in the lowermost part of the neck. So under these scenarios, just the location itself is a very difficult scenario. And we are always worried when we have done a thyroidectomy and we don't find the gland at all. We don't find the parathyroid gland at all. Forget the vascularity, which is very important, because vascularity for parathyroid comes from the inferior thyroid artery. Again, that also needs to be saved. So we are looking at saving a parathyroid gland along with its blood supply so that it can perform properly in the postoperative period. If we can prevent even a temporary hypocalcemia, that is a very, very good thing which we can do. Now, this is one of my favorite things. Somebody, when some senior surgeon, when he was asked, how do you identify parathyroid? He said, it looks like the tongue of a jaundiced hummingbird. So you can imagine, hummingbird itself is 1 gram in weight, and a jaundiced hummingbird, to find it and look at the tongue is something which you can't, it's just an imagination. That's what he means. So basically we need to look at, when we are looking at identification and making it better, we need to look at how to improve the vision and how to improve the differentiation. So how does it happen? It happens by an image quality, which is magnification, 4K or 3D visualization, and differentiation happens by fluorescence. Now, how does magnification help? This is a very simple image, a picture of a bird sitting on the tree, but you can hardly make out when it's a full image is shown to you. But as the magnification improves, you can clearly see that the image or the bird becomes clear. So the magnification, even when you are operating by open surgery, you use a loop, or when you are using a minimally invasive, you can go close to the organ and look whether it is something which you want to save or not, and that helps in the process. Now, one of the techniques which is used, which has been used, is autofluorescence. In fact, that is available only in few of the camera systems, and most of them need to be modified to, be suitable for autofluorescence. But autofluorescence is about a particular characteristic of the parathyroid gland, which makes it shine when a particular light, or light or laser at about 785 nanometers is shined upon it. It gives back a light at, or near infrared light at 820 nanometers, which can be picked up on the camera, and we can see it separate from the surrounding tissues. Now, it is a very difficult technique. I have tried it in a few cases. This is one of the videos you can see. This is the parathyroid. In fact, this is an highly enhanced image. It is not the real image. It is very difficult. The room has to be extremely dark to identify parathyroids. The parathyroids look, like their autofluorescence is approximately 10 times more than the surrounding tissues. So that is how you identify the two glands, but not a perfect, I am not convinced about it. It's not a perfect technique, but yes, if it's available, it could be tried. And there are many fallacies in this. As far as autofluorescence is concerned, brown fat is warmer than the yellow fat. It can really confuse it. An active thyroid nodule can be a problem. Lymph node metastasis, especially from papillary carcinoma, can give false positive. And false negatives, just don't ask, because everything can be false negative, and this, just a room having some bit of light itself is more than sufficient to create a problem. But yes, you have done a central compartment dissection and you don't find the parathyroid at the end of the surgery, and you are in trouble. You want to look for parathyroid, you can look at the central compartment dissection specimen for it. This is the way, without any dye, without any difficulty, you can identify it. Only thing you need is a dark room and a good system to really identify it. But what we are doing is today using fluorescence, that is use indocyanine green to identify the parathyroid. And this is something which I have modified and have learned from the few of the things which are available, and some research papers on very small studies which are available of about 20 cases, 30 cases, and various ways they have studied how they can identify parathyroid. And the technique is very, very simple. We in India have Orogreen. Internationally, various other brands are available for ICG. We administer 5 milligrams of indocyanine green intravenously when we want, or when we are ready. That is, once we mobilize the thyroid gland away from the tracheoesophageal groove. We are clear about the tracheoesophageal groove. We know the approximate location. We have not visually identified the parathyroid gland, or we are unable to identify it. We look at that zone. We ask the anesthetist to give 5 milligrams of indocyanine green and look at the zone, and we will be able to find the area, or we can identify the parathyroid gland. This is the video recently shot. So in a difficult case scenario where there is a lot of bleeding happening, where we don't have a good visuals of the area which we want to visualize, this is something which I have been using off late. Just let this pass. Yeah, so this is a difficult thyroid, very bloody, very difficult to handle. Again, robotic technique, rabbit, it's bleeding quite badly. And once the areas are smudged, it is very difficult to make out what is what. So once we clean, once we clear the area, this is the left side, and I want to identify, because right side I have not been able to identify very clearly. This is the area, suspected area. This is the parathyroid. I'm thinking this is the thyroid gland. We give 5 milligrams of indocyanine green, I've asked the anesthetist to inject. See, this is what we see. The first structure that lights up is generally the parathyroid. It beautifully lights up, and you could see the vascularity coming, the blood vessel. So once that is done, I know for sure this is my parathyroid. I don't need to worry about saving, looking at it again. Throughout my procedure now, I identify the recurrent laryngeal now, and the parathyroid surely has gone down here. So this is the recurrent now, and I confirm the vascularity. See, this is the parathyroid. We can see the artery going into the parathyroid. Before any other structure lights up, the parathyroid lights up usually. So that is an indication that you are in the right area, right location. So parathyroid is safe. This patient's, as a routine, I perform parathormone on the next day of the surgery, just to plan my discharges. So if the parathormone is above 15, I generally discharge the patient the next day or by next day evening. So that saves me a lot of trouble of patient coming back to the OR, or sorry, ER. So other thing which happens, I'm sorry, I don't know whether, yeah. So this is the again scenario after thyroidectomy. You can see one side has left the parathyroid. You can clearly see the parathyroid here, recurrent now on this side. But in another scenario, another patient, yeah, you can look at the parathyroid. The blood vessel is going up to the superior parathyroid, but it is not vascular. But this is a scenario wherein very often I have left the parathyroid in situ, I have not implanted them, because I'm sure this will revascularize after some time. This is a temporary trauma, and when it's a single parathyroid that is saved, you can tell the patient that you may have hypo for a few days, but it will recover. There is another scenario where you are sure it is devascularized or avulsed. You need to look at implantation of the parathyroid. We mince the parathyroid. We send a part of the tissue to the frozen section. We maintain it in ice cold, or we keep it on saline which is frozen. We maintain it there for a while we are completing surgery, and we implant it. We generally do implant it inside the pectoralis major muscle because our primary wound is here. But otherwise, lower end of sternomastoid is a very good area to implant it. And of course, implantation failures do exist, but it is better to have some amount of parathormone than totally being dependent on calcium. So apart from that, yes, yeah, between fluorescence and autofluorescence, there have been some studies, and this is one of the recently published studies wherein you can see there are positives to ICG, much more positives. In fact, they have talked about the cost, but it's not much in India. In fact, it's very comfortable to, I think it's about 500 rupees for ICG. So it's negligible when it comes to the surgical cost and the comfort that gives it to us. And I've already discussed about autofluorescence earlier. So in conclusion, fluorescence is a significant advancement, and in fact, it really helps us in decision making in many situations in head and neck cancers. And I think we have much more to learn in fluorescence than what we already know, and it is an emerging technology. I think over to Karthik for taking it forward over head and neck.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Nayak, for the first part of the topic. So my discussion will be mainly focused on exploring the option of fluorescence-based imaging for sentinel node biopsy in oral cancer. First of all, let us understand the role of sentinel node biopsy in oral cancer. It is still in its initial stage. And why should we really be performing a sentinel node biopsy? We all know that the incidence of nodal metastasis, subclinical nodal metastasis in T1, T2, N0 oral cancer is about 30%. And the two modalities which have been really compared are the elective neck dissection versus observation. Sentinel node biopsy has not been explored in a big way. So it's proven that around 30% of these patients will be having positive nodes, and the present guidelines say that we should be going ahead with elective neck dissection in these patients. But we are this means over treatment in nearly 70% of the cases, and these 70% of the patients are unnecessarily subjected to additional pain and scarring, some amount of bleeding intraoperatively. And the most important thing is the chronic neuropraxia of the spinal accessory nerve, which occurs sometimes and leading on to shoulder dysfunction and some kind of vague shoulder pain, which stays permanently. So, oh, just like sentinel node biopsy has become the standard of care for breast cancers, melanoma, penile cancers, etc., we have to see whether the sentinel node biopsy, I mean, but it has similarly, it is not taken off really well in the oral cancers. However, there was still significant studies, like there is a meta-analysis by Liu et al. Of nearly 66 studies comprising more than 3,500 patients with a pooled sentinel node biopsy identification rate of nearly 96% and a negative predictive value of 0.94. So that is, these numbers are similar to the breast cancer sentinel node biopsy numbers. However, because there was no good randomized control, so this has not been incorporated into the international guidelines. This has recently been changed with the publication of this randomized control trial in JCO. This got published in October 2020, and this is a oncological equivalence trial comparing sentinel node biopsy and elective neck dissection in operable early stage oral cancer, node negative early, oral and oropharyngeal cancer. It's a European study. And what is really heartening is that the equivalence was established in terms that the 5-year recurrence-free survival and the overall survival were identical in both the arms. However, there was significant worsening of the functional outcomes in the neck dissection arm until 6 months after surgery. So there is initial dysfunction post surgery, and this can be countered. I mean, so sentinel node biopsy definitely has a role in oral cancer also, which has been proved recently. Now we all know, just like in other cancers, like for example breast cancer, where radiocolloid dye was the standard of care, we are seeing opportunities or avenues for using ICG, and there is good evidence in breast cancer and endometrial cancer that ICG is a good substitute for, or fluorescence surgery is a good substitute for radiocolloid dye. So we all know that there are some issues with sentinel node biopsy using the radiocolloid tracer. For example, there is a shine through effect, where if there are cervical nodal stations which are in close proximity to the primary tumor, for example, a floor mouth cancer, there might be the shine through effect, and the gamma camera can pick up the primary uptake also. And there is also the scatter effect. And again, this is confusing when it comes to when we're using the gamma camera, and we might get confused while detecting. We are not sure whether it is coming from the primary site or from the secondary lymph nodes. And also, ideally, when we are using a radiocolloid tracer, we have to do preoperative lymphoscintigraphic scanning. And many a time we avoid that, and that is not required when we are doing the ICG based fluorescence testing. Most important problem which I foresee with the radiocolloid tracer is that there are a lot of logistic issues with the availability of the radioactive colloid, because procuring it, safe transport, disposal, and more importantly, there is a need for an in-house nuclear medicine unit, or at least in the city, to properly pursue this radiocolloid uh, uh, tracer technique. So if these are not available, it is difficult to implement the colloid-based sentinel node biopsy. So so the fluorescence-guided SNB detection after ICG injection eliminates the need for radioactive colloid injection and the need for a lymphoscintigraphic scan and nuclear medicine unit. So the shine through effect is not seen, and the real time identification is possible because you just inject the dye and within 3 to 5 minutes you're able to see the dye in the lymphatics. So we don't need to inject it pre-operatively, maybe a few hours or the day before surgery, and we need not admit the patient day before and subject the patient to this kind of a trauma. Everything is done under anesthesia. Once only after the patient is prepared and draped, we inject the ICG dye. So these are the potential advantages that ICG offers over the standard colloid technique. So this is a pilot study where we tried the application of sentinel node biopsy, I mean of fluorescence based sentinel node biopsy identification in a 55-year-old patient who presented with a very small tumor in the lateral border of the tongue, well away from midline, and the CT scan was showing no significant enlarged neck nodes. So this is the small tongue tumor, and we injected about 1 ml of the ICG dye, so which is probably 5 milligrams, 0.25 ml on all the 4 sides. You can see the injection here. And after that, I'll show you this more detailedly in the video. But after raising the skin flaps, because this is the pilot study, we went ahead and did a complete nodal dissection irrespective of the findings of the sentinel node frozen section. So we raise the skin flaps here, and this is what we see in the ICG fluorescence mode. So this completely a black and white mode, so everything is bright. But what is interesting about this mode is you can also see the lymphatics. Lymphatics, this is the way the dye is traveling, and this is the bright lymph node. But on the green overlay mode, where you can identify it more clearly, you can see that this is the bright area, this is the level 2 area, and it really helps you dissect further. So we conducted the dissection in this. This is the CSF mode. This is the brown area, which is relatively more uptake as compared to the blue areas. So you can see the blue area is having there is blue uptake in the lymphatic regions, whereas in the proper nodal region it is having very strong uptake, that is brown color uptake. So we marked it and remove the node. So you can see that after removal of the node also there is some green areas. So and this is the brown area. So there was another sentinel node there. We ended up removing 3 sentinel nodes. So this is the CSF mode. So these are the 3 nodes that these are the 3 modes. So this is a comparatively advantageous over the existing other fluorescence machines that are available in the market. So which have only 1 or 2 modes. So we have the 3 modes, and you can see the advantage of having the CSF mode over the standard fluorescence mode. So here we have completed the lymph node dissection. These are the 3 sentinel nodes, but because just experimental, we have removed the entire the rest of the lymph nodes in the neck also, and everything is stained blue. Over time, everything in the neck, everything in the nodal basin becomes stained. So we are bothered mainly about what is having a very good uptake. What is having a very good uptake are the 3 lymph nodes here. So S1, S2, and S3. So definitely the CSF mode gives us a unique advantage in identifying the sentinel nodes in oral cancer surgery. So so one of the 3 sentinel nodes were identified. So I'll go to the video and share the video. Can you see my video?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah. So this is just injecting the dye. This is a real-time video of 8 minutes. We have just injected the dye in the first 10 minutes, first minute, and it took around 4 to 5 minutes. So you can see, so this is the neck we are exposing. So I am fast forwarding it to 4 minutes or 5 minutes. This is the primary area. This is the primary area which is bright. Okay, at 2 minutes itself, everything is black and white, and we were massaging the neck for some time. It really helps in flow of the lymphatics, and it takes about 3 to 4 minutes or 4 to 5 minutes. So you can see I've exposed the neck, and slowly there is some dye taking up. So you can see this bright spot. So this bright white spot is the area, potential area. So we are seeing it from outside. We have not taken a skin incision as yet, and we have marked it. You will see. Yeah. So I have marked it. I've seen the bright white spot and marked it externally like this, and going back and rechecking my marking. Okay. It must be very faint on your screen, but if you put off all the lights, you can see it brilliantly in the OT. So now we have gone ahead and raised the skin flaps. Again, I'll show you the three modes: the ICG mode, the green mode, the overlay mode, and the color segmented mode. So we went ahead and removed marked it with the blue, right? So you can see something else is blue here. So I'll stop my screen share here. Okay, I think you got the gist of my presentation. And yeah. So any questions I would like to take for the discussion? Dr. Nayak, any observations you have for the?
Yeah, it was a nice video actually. In fact, interesting thing. In fact, we also started doing for neck mainly when we are doing endoscopic or robotic. And in fact, we are thinking, maybe we should start doing on regular basis to see whether, feasibility we should study with ICG, because the amount of data which is available is not adequate as of now. Except for this recent paper which came out, which you showed, which is in JCO, nothing else which we have seen so far. And do we really take one paper and go ahead or not is something which we have to think of. And we need more studies, and we need to really look at more detail before we take it. But it's a good technique. See what three important things, a few important things which people have spoken about when it comes to sentinel node, especially even for head and neck, is improvement in the nodal yield, or quality of the nodes which you are getting. You will not miss the nodes. Even the pathologist, when they can pick up the nodes, they will not miss those nodes which are significant. So I think at least these two are very important points which I can think of when it comes to neck dissection. There is a long way to go. In fact, I think we should. I think maybe maybe there should be a trial. Once we have sufficient. I'm thinking of starting a trial on this. Let's see what happens.
Thank you, sir. Let me just clarify once again. This was just a pilot exploratory study. So probably once we get more cases and we explore it in more patients, where we'll be doing the complete neck dissection irrespective of the findings on the initial fluorescence sentinel node biopsy results. And once we get those numbers in, then we can go in for some kind of more detailed randomized control trial. So there's one paper by Feng et al. Where they've tried. They've tried it in consecutive 26 patients. So that I think is the largest series so far, And India being an area where cancer, I mean, we have so many oral cancers. I think it's a very easily doable study, and we will get numbers quickly. And I exhort people like Dr. Rao, who's heading an institute, and similar heads of the institutions can go ahead and do such kind of studies. I'll be very happy to see that. Thank you, sir. Dr. T.S. Rao, sir, you are there on the panel. Do you want to make any point on this? Or anyone else for that matter?
I don't see him on the panel, so yeah.
He's there on this thing. He is muted, but he's there on the. I've not received any questions on the WhatsApp group. Yeah, sir is there.
No, this is
So, sir, please go ahead. Yeah.
I have no experience, to be very honest. I've stopped doing head and neck surgery. I've handed it over to see the head and neck team somehow are not as deep into ICG. I've tried to induce them, seduce them, whatever you want to call it. Most of them are not women, so don't misunderstand me. But somehow they used it for a while, and then they thought the value is less. They should have. They must be listening to you. So I really hope they change and use the machine that is there. So I really hope this actually works for patients, because it's so much more easier to do this than to do anything else, whether it's blue dye or the other one.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I think we can conclude the session here.